Welcome to another episode of the Bootleg Universe Podcast, where we will be talking about VFX sequences with Graham Hughes, our lead VFX artist, Kenlyn Clark, our director, and I'm Sam Lasky, the writer and producer of Guardians of Justice. Today, we are going to be discussing a sequence that we refer to as the Speed Racer fight. Yeah. Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about why we call it the Speed Racer fight?
Yes. As you may or may not know, if you've watched the show or you've watched any of the other earlier breakdowns that are on the Bootleg Universe channel, Speed Racer, the Wachowskis, I think, big influence on the show. And this show obviously leans towards us being able to kind of play in that same world. And so if you haven't seen Speed Racer, which was released in 2008 by Warner Brothers,
to very little fanfare.
Very little fanfare. Unfortunately, when I saw it opening day at the
saw it at the Tribeca Film Festival.
That's right. We were both,
I saw it sometime later.
Yeah. And I think I probably saw it 3 times in the theater. I was really just enamored with how innovative the style was, the use of green screen. I know that, it kind of went, maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time when it came out. I think there were 3 films, not to go on a tangent, but there were 3 films that came out around the same era that were weirdly a little bit ahead of their time. And they all start with S in their title. Speed Racer, Sucker Punch, which is to some effect, a visual influence, visually when you look at that film, the video game kind of aesthetic and stuff. Yeah. And Scott Pilgrim. Yeah. And so the 3 S films that came out within about 2 years of each other, all maybe at the time, people kind of, I don't know how they reacted entirely.
I mean, Scott Pilgrim was very well received.
Well, it was well received, yeah. I think that it was but all of it was very ahead. I don't think there had been things where people had seen a lot of that type of stuff before.
All of those examples were kind of leaning into they weren't trying to go fully realistic with theirs. Right. They were leaning hard into aesthetic.
Right.
And this was at a time where, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight hadn't come out yet, but Batman Begins had, and Casino Royale had, and there was
we were in the gritty reboot era.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're taking things seriously now.
Right. So there's this 2 versions of this. You have the Sin City 300, and then you have the gritty James Bond, Jason Bourne type stuff. So to go to this actual thing, part of building out episode 7, like I had kind of said earlier,
we talk about this in a previous episode, but I think we should get into it again. Yep. That episode 7 was the least ready when Ken and I came on board the project. We essentially had 2 scenes that were filmed. The conversation between Speed and Awesome Man before she goes to the Citadel, and spoiler alert for episode 7, when Awesome Man rips Speed's head off at the end. And we knew that we had to fill in what leads up to her going to the Citadel and what happens on the Citadel before she dies.
Yeah. And Addie really very graciously, obviously in discussions with all of us, we talked a lot about what did we want, what did we kind of want to do. And one of the things too is when I was editing on the show with Sam and Addie particularly was their openness to be let's just kind of keep pushing it. It was constantly scaffolding and leveling and going, what if you had this sequence? And then what if we did this sequence and this sequence? And so the show kind of through the editing was constantly building and building and building and building. And at one point, Addie just kind of I remember I was on the phone and he was very inspiring and kind of just saying kind of just go for it. And when you're editing, and by this point, COVID had hit, so we were all separated.
Not when we first made this sequence. When Graham animated the VFX, COVID had hit, but I think we had already constructed. You had
part
already
of it, not this actual, not okay. This. Yeah. So there's obviously multi kind of levels in all of this. This one was right after COVID had basically hit because I was editing at my mother-in-law's. And so he just was like, basically go for it. Same with Sam, just kind of do your thing. So I sat down for probably, I'm going to say it was a week, and just went through every frame of anything that had ever been shot for this show. And I'm talking like if one of the characters had moved their head in a certain way, like that was isolated on my timeline to be like, that's somebody getting punched in the face. Even when the camera was rolling between takes, when we were shooting green screen stuff, if one of the actors had done something, that could be this, that could be that, blah, 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 blah. And as it went along, obviously Speed Racer, big influence, and it was just like, what if just kind of playing with all these levels and things kind of all happened. And so it was just one of those really like exciting editing moments where it just kind of is starting to, and you're like, oh, this person, they could be like, and we got shots of the Nighthawk Global Defense guys pointing down because we had originally shot that shot for them to be executing somebody. But I'm like, it looks like they're shooting from a elevated position. So what if I move them up here? And then that it kind of what will lead to the scene where she runs up the wall and things are blowing up and blah, blah, blah. So it was like that. It was just like letting the footage inform the actual scene. Kind of working backwards a little bit.
And from a storytelling perspective, one of the things that you and I did throughout the show was beef up Speed's character.
Yeah.
Give her new scenes, whether it's live action or animation, just give her character more to do so that by the time we reach episode 7, she's almost a co-lead, really is a co-lead with Nighthawk of the show, and we're rooting for her, we like her, we want to see her succeed. But if she just goes up to the Citadel and runs around and then gets her head ripped off, nobody's going to care. We have to we have to have like a climactic battle sequence. We have to really give the audience something cool before we pull the rug out from under their feet.
Yeah.
And we knew that we needed to do that, but like you said, we didn't really have much footage for it. We had one final day of additional photography in front of a green screen. One day to just film Sharni Vinson, who plays Speed, punching and kicking and running and just doing any possible motion in any possible direction. And we would figure out how to cut it together later, which is exactly what you do. So let's play the scene and then we can talk about how it was created.
Okay.
So two quick notes. Number one, we got to shout out our amazing composer, the Swedish god Oscilian.
Yes.
Great man, handsome man.
Yep.
Stylish man.
Yep. Talented man.
Who created all the music for the show, but I particularly love the song that's used here. And then the big boy who gets kicked in the nuts at the end of the scene, he was actually on set as our Nighthawk body double. Because Diamond Dallas Page was in Georgia. We didn't really have the money to fly him out and put him in a hotel, and so we found a really large guy, because DDP is a giant in his own right, and we put him in the Nighthawk costume. Now, this Nighthawk costume is 6 years old at this point.
Seen better days.
I'm like trying to reattach some of the pads that are falling off with super glue, and also because it's not the best fabric in the world, it's never like been in the wash.
Right. No. Yeah.
It smelled so vile.
Yeah.
I once had it in my car for a couple days, and the car smelled for like a week after I took it out of the car. And this poor guy, and if you've never been on a film set before, they can get pretty warm.
Yeah.
Because there's lights everywhere. These are high-powered, very hot lights. You know, if you ever tip over one of those powerful lights and it falls on the ground, it can cause a fire. That's how hot it is. He is just dripping sweat.
Like rain.
And I think there are probably shots in episode 7 where if you look closely at Nighthawk in the mask, you can see sweat just flowing out from under the mask. Not little drops, but like a steady stream of sweat. Poor guy. And also, I got to shout out, he brought his mom to set to watch him film. And he's like, 6.5 feet tall.
He's a mountain of a man.
He is the mountain from Game of Thrones. She's like 4.5 feet tall, 80 pounds,
Precious.
if that.
Yeah.
Adorable, the nicest little old lady. I think Sharni says to her, "How did that ever fit in that?" She's like, "I get that all the time."
Humongous.
All right, so we can move on with actually talking about what we're here to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So let's take a look at Ken, what you originally put together.
This was made in the editing timeline, so Adobe Premiere, and I just drew backgrounds in Clip Studio Paint, just basic backgrounds, what I pictured, what I would think is kind of like a gigantic danger room in the middle of the Citadel. And so it's just kind of rough drawings filled in the background. So I'll just press play.
It is remarkably similar.
So we had these shots. So like where you see her hand there, that was a shot when she was going into the portal earlier, and we're like, oh, and it's like that's a great shot. Looks like a gunfighter, getting ready for the showdown. And at one point, I think when we were on the green screen, I asked her to just rotate, like turn when she was in one position.
I think we had a lazy Susan.
A lazy Susan, that's right, because she did have we had her meditating. And, just because you kind of know you're going to use some of those. So, like, these shots where she is doing the kicking, too, I think that was, she was basically got her doing some kicks.
Yeah.
And so, moving it across the frame, you add this kind of feeling that she's, actually kicking and jumping through the air simultaneously. And
I think that was an old shot of her running.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a shot of her running in place just in front of her green screen.
I think at some point, very early on in the process, they put her on a green screen treadmill.
Yes. And so she was running and then, following behind. And obviously when Graham adds the background, but kind of making it look like the body's moving, as you're running, like you're dodging stuff. So it doesn't look like somebody's just standing there. You're kind of adding this like, move around, as they're kind of doing it. And then running up the wall. I mean, who doesn't love running away from explosions? Just looks so cool. And then Graham, you made this shot way better in the finished version. But yeah, I just love this. So this is what I'm talking about. Is like this actor, Jared. He was standing there, and on the shot, he put the gun down to actually do the shot. And then in the edit, I was like, oh, it looks like if I put it in reverse, he's bringing the gun up. And then if I slide Sharni doing this kick by him, now it looks like she's kicking the gun up out of his hand. And then kaboom, the explosion just follows. And then originally, I think we had him, he was going to be like more of a boss type character. And I think we were going to remove it.
We were also kind of running out of, when we were filming, or...
I think, I want to say, wasn't he in another sequence or something? Didn't he come after the video game side-scrolling fight? I can't remember.
Don't remember.
Yeah, and so it just was like, oh, what a funny little button to this scene is like, that it's the Indiana Jones moment of the guy swinging the sword around and she's like, huh, whatever, and just like, kicks him.
I don't care how big you are.
Yeah, like
that still hurts.
Yeah. So it's just a real, it was just an editing. I mean,
and Ken, can you talk about, you're making very specific choices in terms of the way you're moving the camera, the quote unquote camera, and
this feels very inspired by Speed Racer, even in the previs. Like, you can definitely see how it correlates to some of the action sequences in that movie.
Right, in which they're mostly filmed in front of green screens. They're taking live action actors and basically putting them in anime fight scenes.
Yeah.
The camera in Speed Racer moves the way it does in great anime.
Right. And this is like almost in some ways the fun about this sequence is that it is to kind of, I guess I'll say, on some level, the antithesis of what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, you know, kind of going, okay, if you want your visual effects to feel a little bit more believable psychologically to people, you're kind of keeping cameras where they would actually be. This sequence is just like, you're kind of throwing that to the wind. You're doing a live action animated sequence. So the camera is suddenly omnipotent. It can be anywhere it needs to be at any time to convey any effect that it actually wants. And so that kind of realism is definitely replaced with this, like, just, you know, hyper realism.
Well, we can't be real with it. There's no version of this sequence of putting a bunch of green screen characters that didn't actually interact into a fight scene that's going to be realistic. So you got to run away from that as hard as you can.
Exactly. And you lean into it. And the fun thing is like, this is Speed's episode, ultimately, this final episode. And so it's really about showing her character in the coolest ways possible. And so her going through the portal sequence, the video game side-scrolling sequence, which is amazing, this, and then obviously the claymation fight sequence, and then the kind of final confrontation. So it's just like, this is the opportunity for us to just lean into Speed and just give you everything that you would want from like a Flash. It's the Flash set in the Speed Racer world.
Right. And
so I'm kind of just using, this is obviously the shot used earlier from the opening episode. It's the same thing, and just kind of, you know, making it look like
this is the first of the coin shots.
Yes, and trying to just show a certain sense of geography, show where the characters are in relation to each other, so that you're setting this up in these kind of wide shots initially to be like, okay, she's surrounded by these characters, and then, you know, creating the parallax, you know, concept here, where you're having your background and your foreground moving kind of in opposite, your X and Y are moving opposite with each other to kind of create this like cool effect that makes it look like the camera is now spinning around her. And then, you know, this is a reused shot from when she goes through the portal, but it works because it could be her signature shot as
this is how she starts running every time.
Speedster, yes. Yeah. As a speedster, she goes, she like a track star or an Olympian, goes into the running position and then takes off. And so, and so these guys all shooting.
One thing I want to point out is most of the movement in the first half of this sequence is horizontal. It's left to right and right to left, which keeps it visually consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're kind of staying on that same plane. And then now this was replaced by the laser guns or whatever. But I always liked that kind of like, you know, the idea of, you know, shells spinning and stuff. And then and then this was just funny because it was just like, okay, well, what if she's moving so fast that I can just freeze frame the actual actors so they don't have to actually be moving or anything, and then she's just kicking them like they're, you know.
I love how this just uses her, you know, she has all these disconnected shots of her doing various kicks and stuff on green screen. Yeah. And it's like, there's no transition between them, but it's fine. She's just like, she basically teleports from one shot to another.
Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It fits with the kind of anime Speed Racer vibe, which is very like pose based.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's kind of like snap into a position and hold it for a second, snap to another position.
Right. It's basically a series of tableaus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And so all these kicking movements weren't one, you know, shot. It was just mixing it, and then Graham did his wizardry to really tie it all together. But I love this, you know, bodies flying around, like she's moving so fast that everybody's still just like airborne, flying through the air, and then interconnecting like a body flying into, now all of a sudden she's over there, and kicking that guy. That shot worked out really well.
And
that was one of those editing moments where you're like, oh yeah, that connects nice.
A couple of the freeze frames of the characters like flying are, I think those are images from the sprites from the video game fight that comes right before this.
Yes, yeah. So all those still shots definitely came in handy, kind of connecting them all and just random bodies. I always like these shots of the reflection.
So now we're actually changing the way the characters are moving in this sequence. Now we're actually adding a large amount of vertical movement across the screen. And what's cool about what you did there with that the goggles transition is suddenly it feels like we've moved on to a different stage of the scene.
Yeah.
So the audience is now going to accept that the movement has changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're through the looking glass now.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like it moves from this, this 2D area to like a more of a physical space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I think, good action scenes.
And of course, same actor.
Same Jared Bell, there he is. And I like, where action scenes feel like there's mini chapters in them. So, the initial build up, then the actual just, rock'em sock'em style fight, and then onto something, a bigger challenge, like now she's being shot at from up here. And of course, Graham made this in the final version even billion times more epic. But running up the wall, kicking, explosion following, landing, and then just kind of a funny button at the end to kind of accentuate the scene.
Great.
And then boop.
I like how, they all wear the mask, the Mellow Devil mask, but he really feels like Bane in that mask.
Yeah.
So let's play with the two on top of each other, before and after.
Sure.
Oh, nice.
So now what this clip is going to show you is the original and the finished product side by side. See what Graham added to it. Now let's pause here.
First thing is motion blur.
Yes. So Graham, one of the ways you make it feel like an anime are with these, I just refer to them as anime lines.
Speed lines, anime lines, yeah.
Yeah, it's a form of motion blur, of simulated motion blur, not the character that Speed beats up in episode 5 or 4. I don't even remember now. Yeah, I think it's episode 5. But the simulation of movement on film,
right.
or not even the simulation. For example, if you wave your hand in front of their face, it looks blurry, right? And so a large portion of the history of cinematic innovation has been how do you create motion blur that looks like the real world when there's not actually motion blur. And, in classic cartoons, when they, run really fast, they animate multiple legs or cover them with dust particles. In a lot of Japanese anime, they just add lines that look like blurry motion.
And we have the benefit of, being able to use technology that can actually simulate motion blur on still images and such. So we're using, anime lines as well as additional motion blur just to create even more movement.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool because it really adds, you adding that, extra level of these speed lines. It really shows that we're entering into a different time space here, so it's not just, she's moving fast, but in a weird way, they're being sucked into, this buildup of this speed action sequence.
It's so identifiably anime, it just kind of immediately signifies, okay, we're doing anime now.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't watched a lot of anime, just through cultural osmosis, that's what that looks like.
Yeah.
All right. And over. So did you add motion blur to Speed in the middle?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's
I also
so cool.
stabilized her, so she was a little off center on that turntable.
So you can see up in the upper right hand corner that the characters are now blurry.
Mm-hmm.
But also got this kind of like arc of lightning going around, you know, just in the
So
it's just
awesome.
like pure stylish stuff. That's not like a diegetic element or anything.
It's so cool. And real quick, the background. So did you create this big citadel? Was this a big matte painting, or what did you do?
No, this is a whole 3D environment. That the idea being that this is supposed to be like a danger room, a la X-File or X-Men, different X thing. But so it's mostly wide open space with like this kind of perimeter with turrets. But on the sides, I don't think you ever see them in focus, so it's really hard to tell. There's like just a bunch of weapons of various kinds. You've got like rockets, there's helicopters. Those pens directly behind them with the kind of force field looking things have the cyborg T-Rexes in them.
This guy, all the detail.
So there's just all kinds of stuff. But, you know, it's just kind of there in the background. It adds detail and you don't ever really see it, which is unfortunately how a lot of CG environment design goes. It's just sort of there. There's all kinds of stuff. You'll never really see it clearly, but that's, you know, you got to do it if you want it to look like
100%. Because, I mean, I'm here just like drawing, you know, and it's like, yeah, this stuff doesn't necessarily come into play, you know, into the scene, but it adds, even in just like a couple frames, just adds so much to the world that we're watching. And so
it also provides some contrast for the foreground people because they're dark against what could easily be a dark or kind of drab background. So just having something bright there.
Yeah, totally makes them pop.
Highlight.
Yeah, that's cool.
We go back to that shot of speed right there. Yeah. So, how are you creating the lightning? Is this another sort of fractally generated?
Yeah. I mean, it is literally like a fractal noise pattern, which is something if anyone watching is familiar with Video Copilot. It's this series. This company
Andrew
run by
Kramer.
Andrew
What's
Kramer.
up? I'm Andrew Kramer.
Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net.
Yeah, he does these VFX tutorials in After Effects that are just kind of the foundational learning experience for anybody who's ever learned After Effects. They're just like so essential. But he makes liberal use of fractal noise for generating just basically any type of energy or plasma effect and various other things too. But just anytime where you need random variation, you use these kind of noise patterns. So it's basically just a white and black randomized pattern of just like you know, grayscale. And you know, I've for the most part here just kind of animated it so that it moves quickly and chosen a kind of a turbulence pattern to it that looks kind of lightning-y. And I've crushed out all the blacks and only got the highlights and, you know, kind of given them a purple glow. And when it moves fast enough, you kind of get this kind of lightning effect. There's just sort of electricity sparking around.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But yeah,
so so go back to speed running right there. How did you create this background?
I mean, that's just like another anime line pattern.
Okay.
It's just like literally just one of those sideways facing ones, but it's just tilted.
Okay, all right.
It's nothing complicated.
But are you creating those anime lines yourself, or are you just purchasing some kind of package?
There's a combination. I do have some just kind of stock ones that are just I think I got on like Production Crate or something like that.
Okay.
But you know, depending on the occasion, I make some too, just if it needs like a different level of energy.
Okay.
But I like just really doing a lot to try to just sell the idea that they're frozen in time, like is just creating a little bit of movement. So like, you know, when you have in the example that you have down there, they're literally just frozen. But I took the actual clip and have them play. I have them puppeted a little bit so that there's like little points on their bodies so that I can move them a tiny bit as the clip moves
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so we've got also the plasma pulse from the rifle and this burst of plasma here.
Yeah,
looks really cool.
Animating and the shot is traveling slowly through the scene.
And like as we've seen with a lot of shots that we've talked about already, you've put a lot of particulate matter into the air.
Yeah, this was directly inspired by like a particular scene from Speed Racer that I remember calling out, the snow fight.
Yeah. Yes. There's snow in the air, and when the camera whips, the snow becomes a line.
Yeah, like the snow turns into speed lines every time the camera moves, which is just like a brilliant way to just use the diegetic environment to create the anime vibe. So I'm kind of doing that very similar effect. Like, you know, we've established in previous scenes that when she goes into her like speed force mode, you know, there's all this, you know, particulate in the air, which is like dust or whatever. And really just using that to streak across the scene every time the camera moves and changes.
Mm-hmm. I like you moved her closer too, you know, just like it makes it just more dynamic that she's that close to him.
How dare you disrespect the director's composition, Graham?
I just noticed this now. No, it's great.
Yeah, you can see the particulate matter turning into lines. Yeah,
and every time someone gets hit, like more particles stream out from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love all that. Love these.
And the impact. It's like a ripple coming out of the face. That's so. I've never noticed that before.
I love that one dude just flying across the screen.
Right?
Yeah. So this is
one of the best parts.
Yeah, both of the...
Well, she's fighting. There's already a guy flying across the screen.
This is from the video game fight that was just before.
Yeah.
Just a still photo.
I changed the timing just a tiny bit.
Yeah. I love that. I love how the scale you made it. You know, obviously this that just looks like it's epic.
Yeah, I dramatically underestimated how much space she needed when I first was designing this.
Yeah.
Because, like, she needs to be moving at a plausible enough speed that you can, that it's like superhero speed, like the Flash, while also needing to take some time to get to the edge of this arena.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I panned back and was like, is this enough? And like, nope, pan back some more.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, can you go back to where it goes by really, really quick, but where the close-up of the guns...
Yeah, because you added actual...
I added another shot in here.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, no, there was a shot. But like, I went online and found a model of the actual gun that we were using for props on set, which is just like a Halo assault rifle.
Right. That's exactly what it is. And people keep pointing it out like, did you guys know your weapon looks like it's from Halo? It's like, because it was bought at Toys R Us.
Yeah, some of the henchmen have the mask from the Ninja and Metal Gear Solid. But yeah, so like I actually just made that like a fully 3D shot that I added in there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought for some reason I created that, but no, you actually had that in there too. So never mind. I'm not original.
No, I know, but I remember you saying that you recreated it in 3D, and it looks like awesome because you have. I think that's the hand holding it, so it looks way more like realistic that way. Yeah, awesome.
This is one of the parts where it diverges quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of interesting. No, that's actually kind of perfect. So yeah, the main kind of problem with the bottom one, which was like great idea, is just like her bottom leg doesn't really look like it's in the air.
Right.
So like the issue in making this shot work was just making her look like she's jumping as opposed to just standing kind of sideways.
Right.
So I just literally took...
Because that's all she's doing is she's basically just her foot's on the ground here on a green screen and she's kicking.
Which props for her flexibility.
Yes,
incredible.
100%.
But yeah, like I literally just took her top leg, like the leg that's in the air from like the knee down, and just replaced her bottom leg with it with a pivot so that I could just like kind of rotate it around as the shot moves on. And there's like a little bit of puppet tool going on where I'm just kind of like adjusting her position slightly as she rotates through the air. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it totally worked. Very simple. Not like a complicated thing at all.
Mm-hmm. And way better too, because like I said, I was like, oh, it's cool. He's reacting to getting kicked his gun, but this is like way more dynamic of like actually a guy flying up through the air as the explosions coming up and following them.
Yeah, it's the same guy that was flying through the air in the previous section.
He's been cloned.
He's great.
So let's see.
Lightning strike.
Yeah. Cool.
Not only did he get kicked in the balls, he got kicked in the balls with the fast force.
Yeah, the fast
Those
force.
Things are up inside him now. They're never coming back.
Yeah, that was a super fun sequence.
Yeah. This was you know, I like to think that, you know, this
This peak teamwork mode.
yeah, really it was. And, you know, Sam and Addie, you know, like I said, very much, you know, going more, and then, you know, me editing the initial sequence, and then Graham really taking it to the next level with, like, making it all work.
Yeah, because we went through a couple different fight scenes at the Citadel that ended up getting cut.
Yeah.
Because this ended up being so much more dynamic, and also we kept running into the problem of, well, how do you make it compelling when she can run really fast? It's the problem the Flash runs into. It's the problem Superman runs into. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, the superpower becomes unstoppable.
Yeah.
So we had a sequence where Nighthawk was... It ended up morphing into the hologram conversation at the end, but you had storyboarded a sequence where Nighthawk is a hologram.
Mm-hmm. Which was Angry Metal created as an animation.
It's not in the finished version, right?
No, it is.
Oh, okay. I thought we cut that.
We did, but there was also a scene where she confronts him in, like, what looks like a control room, and he's a hologram there initially. We cut that.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So initially, and looks like he's shooting her and all this stuff, but, you know, it just moves so much better to kind of keep this momentum of, like, you know, leveling up like a video game, you know, through these levels of fighting before she finally confronts him.
I do like how she changes a room and she changes formats every time she moves from one place to another. It's like that's so satisfying to me on a level I can't really articulate. It just works.
At a certain point, Eric Geisler was our post-production supervisor, said to me, she can't keep going to different rooms.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you saying? Of course she can.
Yeah.
That's how we're transitioning between scenes.
Yeah.
Be as many levels as you want.
Exactly. We're like, how big is the Citadel? Well, it's as big as we need it to be.
At one point, he was like, I want you to sit down and draw out what the Citadel looks like. And I'm like, no, who cares?
Yeah. I always pictured, because I if I'm not mistaken, Eric was one of the initial kind of designers of the Citadel.
Yeah.
So as we were going through this, we kept kind of in our world, we're like, there's another level and there's another level, and this thing's like the size of New York City, you know? And so, yeah. But it definitely makes it more, I guess I'll say, visually interesting. So to kind of do that.
Nice.
All right. I hope you found that informative, and maybe there are things that you can draw from our experience working on this show to bring to your own projects. This has been another installment of the Bootleg Universe podcast, and we'll be back soon with more tutorials and explainers of how we constructed some of the sequences in the show. Thanks for watching.